This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
Welcome everybody to our 9th tour retrospective program. I am Jeremy D'Entremont, a historian for the US LHS, and I host the Society's podcast, Lighthearted. Jeff Gales is with us. Jeff, of course, is the Executive Director of the US Lighthouse Society. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, everybody.
After the tour presentation, Jeff will help run the question and answer portion of the program. We will take questions in the chat, and also you can ask questions verbally, and we'll tell you how to do that when we get to it. There is, for those who don't know, I think most people are very familiar with it, but there is a chat feature in Zoom, and I think people are already using it. I see 11 messages in there already. So if you're not familiar with it, there's a chat button or icon down the bottom of your controls. You click on chat, you'll get a chat window. You can chat with everyone at once if you choose to, or you can pick an individual person that's here and send a message. And we'll monitor that during Skip's presentation, but if you have any questions for him, we'll save them for the end. But feel free to use the chat during the event if you want to. There are a couple of things I need you to do. I was already saying it as you were coming in. Please keep your microphones muted for now. There's a microphone icon that I think is on the lower left for everybody. It is for me anyway. There should be a line through it if you're muted. So don't click on that unless during the Q&A period we call on you later. Excuse me. So please keep it muted. Also, I need you to not click on the share screen option at the bottom. The only person sharing their screen should be Skip, our presenter today. So please don't do that. There are people here I know who did this particular tour with Skip in 2012 that he's going to be talking about, and people have done other USLHS tours, or maybe many of them. For people who are new to this, who aren't familiar with the tours, it's important to know that the tours go to the Society's mission of supporting lighthouse preservation and education. When you take a tour with the US Lighthouse Society, you often get access to lighthouses you can't normally get into, which is one of the big attractions about them. Also, the tours are designed to give a better understanding of the culture and communities where the lighthouses are located. So there's always a lot more to them than the lighthouses. The lighthouses are great, but the whole culture and everything helps to make them a special experience. Skip Sherwood is our tour guide for today. Those of you who've attended the previous retrospectives know that he's been the guide for a couple of them before this one. I know this one is going to be good. As you know, Skip will be telling us about the 2012 tour in Southwest England. In my introduction, I'm not going to go into any detail about it because I know Skip's going to cover a lot of ground. I'm going to let him do that. I was looking at some of the pictures from the tour on the USLHS website, and I will say that I'm hoping that Skip will explain the all-in-one hand washing gadget.
Absolutely.
Okay, good, excellent. I'm looking forward to that. And I also can't wait to hear about the very memorable cruise to Eddystone. Sounds like that was fun. So let me introduce our guide for today, Skip Sherwood. Skip and his wife, Mary Lee, is behind him there. Right? Began volunteering for the Society in 2007 from their home in Fresno, California. In late 2008, they moved to Kingston, Washington to work full-time at the US Lighthouse Society's new headquarters at the Point No Point Lighthouse. Over the next 8 years, they became known as Team Sherwood as they developed and led 20 USLHS tours around the US and the British Isles. That included the Scotland and East Coast of England tour I did with them in 2017, which was really amazing. Skip is a retired logistics professor. He was in charge of creating the itineraries and dealing with the lighthouses on these tours. Mary Lee, a retired grade school teacher, was responsible for accommodations and meals. Currently, they continue to volunteer and are the driving force behind the Society's very successful Lighthouse Passport Stamp program, and they now live in Bonnie Lake, Washington. And with that, I think we're ready to turn things over to Skip. So Skip, it's all yours.
Okay, let me, okay, well, thanks all of you for showing up today. Our weather's been pretty crappy, so I don't know about the rest of you, but we had an awful lot of smoke up here from the fires on the West Coast, but that's finally cleared up. So I'm looking forward to this today. Jeremy, did they have a tour map?
It's funny you say that because I just thought of that, how it meant to say something about that. I'm going to post it right now. I'm going to post the link for it in the chat. So if people, it was sent out in the email, so some people I'm sure already have it. But if not, I'm going to post this link. You can click on the link and you get a PDF of the tour map.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple of things about this tour. When Jeff approached me about doing this particular tour, he had indicated that in 2006 they'd already done one trip to England that included some of these same lighthouses in Cornwall and Devon. But the real goal this time was to get to the Isles of Scilly and the Eddystone. And so when we set it up, we were pretty nervous about getting to the Eddystone because of the weather is usually fairly rough out there. So we set aside 3 days, hoping that one of the 3 days would allow us to get there, and we'll get to that later on. But the main thing we were looking for was to get out to the Eddystone Lighthouse. And this ditty, which was actually a song called, you know, the Eddystone Light, was written in 1866 when the tower called Smeaton's Tower was actually at the Eddystone. Mary Lee and I were going to sing this for you, but we sort of chickened out on that. But it was kind of a risque kind of song back then because of the lighthouse keeper actually marrying the mermaid. And at the end of this, we'll show you what happens to the keeper there. Okay, this is the tour map, which you may or may not have a copy of, but I changed it a little from what originally went out because we actually went to 5 lighthouses that are shown here with the little beacons on them that were not originally on the schedule. Most of these were on the previous tour, and initially we had planned not to go to them, but in some cases we were close enough, and because of timing we were able to actually get to more. One of our trips out to Lundy Island that we had really looked forward to got rained out. I'll show you some pictures of that, but nothing that we took while we were there. To get an idea of the geography of where we were, primarily in these 4 counties in southwest England, the Bristol Channel up here, the Severn River right here, the English Channel here. So you've got this peninsula out here sticking out between these 2 channels and the Celtic Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. And just by where it's located, you can tell it was probably fairly important for lighthouses to be built there. We divided the trip up into several pieces. The first one looked at the lighthouses along the Severn Estuary, then along the North Devon coast, and then Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and then like I said, we set aside 3 days for the Eddystone. We actually ended up going over here for our last lighthouse, which was an add-on at Portland Bill, but that wasn't originally part of the tour. We got met at the airport by a man by the name of Bill Shire, who was very instrumental in restoring the Blacknor Lighthouse in England. And of course, the first thing he did, we asked, we were all wore out, and so we're on our way back to the hotel, and he says, well, let's stop here. So we had to stop at a 600-year-old pub and have a beer. Now, if that isn't a British guy, I don't know what is, but it was very interesting and figuring, and if you, on the inside here, The old bar and stuff was, it was pretty interesting, but we were so wiped out. We just, could we still please go back to the hotel? The day or two we spent in Bristol, if you've never been to Bristol, this is a really interesting town. And some of the highlights there, I.K. Brunel, I say I.K. because the rest of his name is kind of complicated, is probably one of the most well-known and respected engineers in the world, who was able to make major contributions not only in Bristol but throughout England. One of them was the Clifton Suspension Bridge. When it was completed, was the longest span of any suspension bridge in the world. He was also instrumental in helping to design the SS Great Britain, which is the first ocean-going propeller-driven ship. And in 1843, when it was launched, it was the largest ship in the world. He was an architect too and designed the Temple Meads railway station. So this guy was really very prolific, and a lot of what you see in Bristol is a result of him. There was a survey done in 2002 by the BBC that ranked the 100 greatest Britons ever. And he was ranked second only to Winston Churchill in terms of Britain's history. And that's, ahead of people like Shakespeare and Charles Darwin and even like John Lennon. So he was a very important character. When we were there, we hit a couple of places that had literature connections. The Langdagger Trow is where Daniel Defoe supposedly met Alexander Selkirk, which was his inspiration for his book Robinson Crusoe. We had lunch at the Hole in the Wall, which was the inspiration for the Spyglass Tavern in Robert L. Louis Stevenson's book Treasure Island. It was rumored that he spent quite a bit of time there writing that book. Here's Mary Lee at the John Cabot's Matthew, a ship that came to the United States, or actually to Newfoundland in 1497. I was so impressed because the thing was so small, only had 18 men on it. The fact that this thing made it to Newfoundland and back was amazing. Actually, it made it back, but coming back, they missed England entirely and ended up in Brittany, but eventually found their way back. And the one other thing that we enjoyed seeing there was St. Mary Ratcliffe, which was the church that was pretty much right near where we were staying, constructed between like the 12th and 15th century. And you notice the extreme Gothic architecture. I looked this up, and Queen Elizabeth called it, and I love this statement, the fairest, goodliest, and most famous parish church in England. I had to look up the word goodliest because I didn't know what that meant, but that pretty much just means attractive. While we were there, we were watching these gentlemen working on this steeple, and I thought, now there's a job for you, and doing reconstruction and maintenance on this particular tower. All right, the tour began. This is our guide, Jake Simpkin, and Jerry, our bus driver. These guys were tremendous. Jake was wonderful, true Englishman, went well beyond the normal tour guide stuff, and we'll talk about him as we go on here. The first thing we went to is we went to the city of Bath and passed along the way. The place was called the Royal Crescent, which is a crescent-shaped series of townhouses built in 1770. These were, if you get a closer look at them, you can see how these are 3-story townhouses, each one with all these like ionic columns in them. And today they still are occupied. Some of them have been turned into flats, and one of them has been turned into the Royal Crescent Hotel, where you can stay for about $260 a night. Then we on to the city of Bath, to the World Heritage Site there, to the Roman baths, which go back as far as the 1st century. where they built these baths on these geothermal energy sites where the hot water just bubbled up through the ground. You can see by the water, it's not all that attractive. There were all these signs and warnings about even putting your hands in the water, but of course, you know, people were still doing it because people are people. They obviously don't use these anymore. Architecture was wonderful. A lot of statuettes here of Roman emperors. And to get an idea of what the mineral content of these baths is, this was an overflow part, which showed water coming out. And if you see the color of the rock there, all the minerals that had kind of eaten away at that over time. The other major thing we visited here was the Bath Abbey, which is a wonderful structure. Actually, was a Benedictine monastery founded in the 7th century. All the sculpture on the front of this is fascinating. One of the things that fascinated me was this right here, where you've got these angels that are climbing up supposedly Jacob's ladder on the front of this. And the inside was you know, really breathtaking, holds about 1,200 people. And this was particularly well known for the fan vaulting that they have. Okay, so the lighthouse tour, actually the tours of the lights actually began on the lights of the Severn estuary. The Severn combines with the Wee and the Avon and the Usk to make up the estuary, which has one of the highest tidal ranges in the world. If you were with us for the commentary on Wales, we talked a little bit about the estuary then. The only place that has a bigger tidal range is on the Bay of Fundy outside of New Brunswick. So again, this being a major river coming in and out, the longest river in Britain, there were a set of lighthouses built here for a variety of reasons. These two right here we talked about on another tour on the River Usk. Flatholm Island, which is out here, was part of another tour. But here we started up at a set of range lights. Then there were a set of pier lights here around the Avon River. A couple of lights here that guided vessels up the Severn, Burnham-on-Sea down here, and Watchet. The first ones we actually went to were up at called the Berkeley Pill. I put this over, you know, this aerial view to kind of show you what people will go through to get to these lighthouses. The coach dropped us off down here, and these were located out here, some, I don't know, maybe half or 3/4 of a mile. And what you had to cross was this farmer's field. And we had found out that if we'd come a few days early, probably never would have made it because this hay out here had not been baled, and I'm not sure we'd have ever gotten there. But, you know, here we are wandering our way out there. And one of the things that people ran into was this. If you're familiar with something called stinging nettle, it's a weed that, boy, this thing is almost alive. And when it stings you or you step into it, it just sticks these needles into your arm or into your leg or whatever you got down there. And this is just to give you some idea of the stuff that lighthouse people go through to get to see something like this. This is one of the range lights that was out there, but actually kind of interesting. It actually has fluorescent lights in it. They're green, and that's what gives it the light. It's not your normal kind of light that you would normally see in a lighthouse. This here is part of a range marker or a day mark, which seen from a distance is solid. And here's where the lights, and what they look like a couple of milk cans on the top of towers acting as that range light. So this is the Berkeley Pill, which again was the entrance to what they call the Little Avon River. One of the few lightships that we saw was called the Sula lightship, which actually spent most of its life on the Humber estuary on Spurn Point, which we actually saw on the trip we did to Southeast England. But it had been moved here, actually in Gloucester, and had become some kind of aromatherapy site where you went and got aromatherapy, whatever that is. And lately, it has been actually turned into more of an event center. You can rent it out for parties and community events. You can see a little sign up here that says coffee and tea. But like most lightships in Europe versus the ones in the United States, they have these very large lantern rooms. Give you an idea of the size of, that's Mary Lee standing in it. And instead of having just lights on the end of a pole like many of the lightships in the United States, they have these massive lantern rooms. And they, and the people that bought them were very friendly and helpful and gave us a real nice tour of that particular lightship. At the mouth of the Avon River, there is a pair of pier lights, and the reason I put this again in here was to show you this is the Avon River right here, and you can't, because of the tidal ranges, the ports here you have to come through a set of locks. So like the Bristol Cruise Terminal and the harbor right here is actually over here, and the ships come in here, and you've got these two lights here on those piers, one here and one here. This is the one that we were actually able to visit, but before we could visit it, and this first time we ever had to do this, is we had to don hard hats and vests before we actually walked out there. We weren't sure what the hard hats were for because there wasn't anything along the way. And I guess the vests were just to show that we were visitors or something. Of course, you always got one guy that's trying to be funny. And I see Bill Wainscott's on this trip with us. So Bill, if you remember, wearing your hat backwards. And we hiked out to this lighthouse. And when we got there, we were actually able to climb it. And the reason I put this in here is on this particular tour, we were actually only able to climb 3 structures. This one, that lightship we were just on, and probably one of the very last ones, which was the Smeaton's Tower that was moved from the Eddystone onto Plymouth. All the rest of them were on islands or rocks, or we were not able to actually get into them. So this was not a tour of climbing houses, but managed to get to plenty of them. So that was the Avonmouth lighthouses. At Bill Shire, the gentleman I told you picked us up from the airport, when Trinity House was going to have dismantled this particular lighthouse, he led a movement to maintain and restore the lighthouse, which they were able to do. I found it interesting because Bill's an American who was transplanted to Europe and to England, and he was very instrumental in being able to save this particular lighthouse in 2010. It's cast iron with legs, with the 6 legs. This is the best picture I could get of the lens in it because it's one of these biform Fresnel lenses where it's got one lens on top of the other, but because it was facing out towards the water, this was the best view I could get of it. While we were there, we were actually met by the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Somerset. I wasn't sure what a Deputy Lord Lieutenant was, but it was explained to us that each county in England, including Somerset, has a personal representative of Queen Elizabeth. And Julia Elton, who met us there and gave us some history, is the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Somerset. So we were very excited to have somebody with such a regal name meet us. And here she's explaining to Ken Mulder and Darlene Chisholm the nature of that lens that's in that particular tower. Down the coast a little further was a cute little village called Burnham-on-Sea, which over the years had quite a few different lights that allowed ships to come into this fishing harbor. The one on the left here, which was a church, uh, founded in 1316, and that's not a bad photo. That's the way the church is. It's actually kind of the leaning tower of Pisa of Burnham, and it is a tourist attraction as the church itself is sinking on one side. After that, they built another lighthouse here, which the top of this is gone now. They had to remove it when they added the new light in 1832. I threw this in because this gentleman right here is Chris Nicholson, who met us at Burnham on Sea to provide us some information about those particular lights. It's too bad he wasn't with us on the whole tour because he wrote the book on the rock lighthouses of Britain. And on this tour, we actually were able to get to 4 of those rock lighthouses, including the Eddystone. Real nice gentleman who gave us some really good history of Burnham on Sea. Now, in 1832, they built this lighthouse, which became a high light or a rear range light. When it was originally built, it was the only lighthouse. And interestingly enough, this one, I haven't seen a whole lot of these with a gallery that only goes around like part of the tower. And it's got a day mark in the middle. The problem here was it wasn't tall enough. And because of the tidal range, there were actually times at low tide when the ships couldn't see it because it was hidden by the foliage in front of the lighthouse. So they added a second lighthouse, and this is the one that's more famous now, that sits on the beach and is the front range, or as they refer to them in England, the low light. And it was actually built pretty much at the same time as that high light. It was shut down in 1969, but reactivated in 1996. When I saw it, this is where George Lucas gets some of the ideas for his Star Wars characters. You could just see this thing, kind of starting to walk away. Actually, it's got 2 lights. It's got this light right here, and down here it had a sector light with 3 different colors, so it would tell you exactly where you were coming into this port. You had to go down through the beach and in the mud. I'm not sure what Tom and Phil were doing here, but I think they were telling people to get away from the tower so that they could get a picture of it. Although Phil doesn't really ever expect people to do that. But coming through, and this was obviously a low tide. And when we got back to the coach, the driver wouldn't let us on board because of all the mud on our shoes. And so Jake, in his role as tour guide, got out his brush and started cleaning people's feet. We felt like we were getting our shoes shod like a horse, but this went on quite a few times during the tour. Once we got through with the Severn, we moved on to the North Devon coast. And here, these lights are all put in here to guide ships up around into the Bristol Channel. The St. Nicholas Chapel light right here was more to get you into the harbor at Ilfracombe. And unfortunately, this was part of the tour, but then this happened. And so this part of the tour got canceled simply because the boats couldn't make it out to that particular island. The first one here, actually, we were in, this is, this is, I'm trying to remember where we are. Lynmouth, sorry. We're in Lynmouth, in the dual towns of Lynmouth and Lynt. This is the hotel we stayed at. And I just want to show you that we stayed at some pretty nice hotels, but none we've ever stayed at have been quite as nice as this one. Now, Jeff made some special arrangements for Mary Lee and I. I don't know whether the people who are on the tour even know we had these rooms. This was the view from our room looking down at the harbor. And this was the part of the room. This was the living area. Over on this end was the king size bed. And you can see, you know, with the nice sofa. But here was this was the loo. I mean, even had a man and women's potty. Or no, that was a bidet, wasn't it? Yeah, 2 sinks. I mean, this was classic. And so Jeff said every once in a while he could get us an upgrade, and this was definitely an upgrade. These 2 towns of Lynmouth and Linton one sits on top of the hill, one on the bottom of the hill, and it's connected by this funicular railway that runs up and down, which they built so that the 2 towns could actually, you know, be economically tied together. This little railway that ran up and down here was pretty fascinating because it's water powered. When one of the cars is the top, the tank underneath is filled with water. Then letting the brake off, gravity brings it down to the bottom, and with a pulley, it pulls this one to the top. When this one gets to the bottom, the water's dumped out, and the water up here is loaded into this one, and then gravity pulls this one down while this one's pulled back up. It was fascinating to watch it. We rode up and down it just to see how it worked. And when you got to the top, you were in a whole different town with a whole set of different shops. Really an interesting little arrangement. This gives you an idea of some of the tidal range, and many times we had to wait till the tide came in before we were able to take a boat, and our boat to Foreland Point came out of here. This little thing right here actually was a lighthouse at one time, a little basket on top that they put coal and coal fired it to guide people into this particular harbor. Now, we don't always go out on fancy boats, you know, but this is one of the ones that took us out to Foreland Point. And as you can tell, if it's raining or misting or anything, it can get pretty uncomfortable. But it was pretty cloudy this day, but, you know, it actually worked out pretty much okay. This is the lighthouse at Foreland Point, built right into the side of this hill, and a very short lighthouse, but a relatively high focal plane when you start looking at it, particularly from the side. Turns out that this particular lighthouse was very unpopular amongst lighthouse keepers because due to the position on this steep north-facing slope, they never saw the sun for about 9 months out of the year. And only when the sun in the summer came over on this side were they actually able to see the sun. I mean, it was light out, but they rarely saw the sun. Today, they've turned it into a holiday cottage. Down at Ilfracombe, there is a church, the St. Nicholas Chapel, which has acted as a light for their harbor there since the 1600s, which actually makes it the oldest working lighthouse in the United Kingdom. The chapel itself was named after St. Nicholas, who turns out is the patron saint of sailors. Well, I also found out that he's the patron saint of merchants, archers, repentant thieves, prostitutes, children, brewers, pawnbrokers, and unmarried people. So he takes care of a lot of folks, but primarily he was this patron saint of sailors. And it is the same St. Nicholas who historically was legendary for his secret gift giving and eventually turned into the model for Santa Claus. So there is St. Nicholas. We went out of Ilfracombe to go to Bull Point, and this is when we were supposed to go to Lundy Island. Give you an idea again of the boats that we took. This one over here was pretty nice because you could actually get inside. This one over here had some inside, but you can tell by the picture that the weather really wasn't all that great. This took us over to something called Bull Point. And I put this picture in here because it was built in 1879. And you'll notice where the lighthouse is right here. The whole complex was here. The fog signal building was down here. But in 1972, a big hunk of this slope right here broke away, and the fog signal was destroyed, and the building itself for the tower was cracked. So they had to rebuild it in 1972. And you'll note today it looks totally different than it did when it was originally built in 1879. But you can see how close this whole thing is to this steep cliff here, where part of this cliff broke off. The building itself, obviously looking much more modern, and the diaphragm horns for the light signal are built right into the tower now. Now, this is where we didn't get to go. I took these pictures off the internet, but you can see why we're kind of disappointed that we weren't able to get to Lundy Island. On the highest point of the island, you see the old lighthouse, which they at one time decided, well, they were having problems because sometimes it was obscured by clouds and fog. So they built two lighthouses, one on the north end and one on the south end. And if we had been there, we would have been able to get to all three. But the best picture we got was this. This is one that Ken Mulder took from one of those boats when we went to Bull Point. This is actually a photograph of that high lighthouse. The next one that we were able to view was at Heartland Point. This one was designed by the same person who designed the current Eddystone light, that being James Douglas, who designed about 20 different lighthouses. And when we got to this one, we ran into this. We had thought we might be able to get right down to the lighthouse, but the lighthouse itself is now a private residence, and with all these warning lights or warning signs and private property and no admittance and all these kind of things, we decided it wasn't a very good idea to try to climb over this fence. And the problem here is that this lighthouse sits out on a point, and if you go down this road and kind of go around the front of this cliff, you can get to the lighthouse. But instead, we of course had to do some hiking as we went up this trail. And if we had been able, here's that gate right here, if we'd been able to go through here and come around, we would have been able to reach, the lighthouse itself. Instead, we had to hike up over, and then we're able to get this particular view of the lighthouse. Part of it, like I said, it's a private residence now, which actually, when it was purchased for £500,000, I'm not sure how long ago that was, but they pretty pricey, but a pretty good view. Here's another angle, which somebody else sent me. And right here, all this area up through here used to be keepers' houses. It was all taken down and then was serviced by this helicopter pad right here. You can see an original seawall they built right here to try to stop some of the erosion on this particular slope. And then our last one along the North Devon coast, Trevose Head. This one originally had both a high and a low light. As a matter of fact, there's a picture here that a historical one, which shows when both the lights were, where both of the lights were. So you really had a range light here, kind of unusual because they both had first order Fresnel lenses, and kind of unusual to have a range light with two Fresnel lenses. And today, two first order lenses. Today, these are just, again, holiday accommodations and in these two somewhat detached buildings. And this is really what it looks like today. Again, as you can tell, both this one and Heartland, we were only able to get, some side views. There's a good shot of the what looks like a clamshell lens that was in the tower. All right, we got to talk about the food just a little bit. When they talk about a full English breakfast, it normally includes all of this. And of course, in England, they're big on baked beans for breakfast, cooked tomatoes, these little potato wedges, mushrooms, black pudding, scrambled eggs, usually poached eggs, sausage, and bacon, which is almost more like slices of ham. So every morning, well, you don't have to eat all this, but if you're in England, I just love their breakfasts. I mean, that's a meal for the whole day. A lot of people don't like the black pudding, but if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it right. Now, I love the food in this area because it's just good, wholesome food. Pasties being one of the hardcore things that came out of this area in Cornwall and the tin mines, where pasties were kind of the main lunch meals by the miners who took them into the tin mines. These are all over the place, put gravy on them. Oh, they're the best. And of course, all kinds of stews and any dinner, of course, always comes with some kind of peas and potatoes. They're very big on potatoes. This is what I mean by just good meat and potatoes. And of course, fish and chips. And then the mushy peas. I mean, fish and chip and mushy peas. Oh God, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it here. And then of course, any kind of sausage. And of course, there is with peas and potatoes again. And there, of course, is another pasty. Now we had other, different stuff, but this is just the kind of meal that I, love. And then of course, there's the desserts. One of our favorites was the Eaton's Mess, which is some kind of a mixture of strawberries and meringue and whipped cream, which supposedly was created at Eton College. This was one of our favorites. And then of course, scones with clotted cream and jam is one of the staples of this area. This was Mary Lee's favorite thing. This was one of my favorite things, toffee waffle cheesecake, which we had at that Torp Hotel. And this thing, I don't even remember what it was, but it was so good looking, I had to put it in here. Something with ice cream on top. You have any idea what that was? It was like a raspberry tart or whatever. Anyway, all right, so that was some of the food. We got down to Cornwall. As you can see, we went to a series of lights here. These two particularly, again, guiding ships up into the Bristol Channel, whereas these down here were more guiding ships into the English Channel, and long ships were right on the end of this peninsula, keeping ships away from the rocks down here. We actually spent the night here in St. Ives. And the first one we went to was to the Godrevy Lighthouse, which was built in 1859. And this particular one sits on a little island and marks a reef that sits off of this island. The history or the story, the most interesting one about this one, this was the inspiration for Virginia Woolf's book, To the Lighthouse. The story is actually set in the Hebrides, but she based it on the summers that she and her family spent around St. Ives and this particular lighthouse. And she visited this lighthouse when she was 10 years old. And at that time, her name was Adeline Virginia Stephen, and Wolfe being a married name, and her signature in the guest book that she signed in 1892, sold at auction for $15,000. So having her original name on that and the history behind this particular lighthouse and the inspiration it provided her, for those of you that have read that book, To the Lighthouse, that's the historical significance of this particular lighthouse. The Pendine Light, another wonderful complex, the E-shaped keepers' houses down here, with the fog signal out front, again sitting on a high cliff, so the tower not all that tall, but relatively high focal plane. One of the guides here told us that these used to be gardens up here, or they tried to grow things up here. But as you can see, this being pretty much a windswept area, there's actually very little foliage, and as a result, they were never really able to grow much there. This had a huge lens in it. The story on this one, this is a 2.5 ton lens floating on a trough of 3/4 of a ton of mercury. And mercury still in that tower. And you can just see by looking at it over here, the size of these lantern rooms that were required for this size of a lens. And this is where the front of the lighthouse, it's actually again a vacation rental, if you will. And I remember this one well because we went and knocked on the door trying to get into this one because we figured they might let us climb this tower, but as it turned out, no one was home or no one was answering, especially when they saw all of us out there. And this is where we chose to take our group photo in front of this particular lighthouse. Here's Jake, our guide over here, Phil Borkowski, our photographer, and our crew in front of Pendine. The southernmost point on mainland Britain is down here at an area called the Lizard. And this lighthouse was actually on the previous tour. And so there was a small group of folks who've been on that tour, took off and went to a different lighthouse that day, which we'll get to a little later on. But the rest of us went down to this light here down at the Lizard, which again, as you can see sticking out on this point, kept the vessels away from that point, and also was a twin light, not a range light, but a twin light, which when we were there, as you can see, this with that scaffolding on it, that's always a little disappointing, but the lantern room on this one has been actually removed. Both of them had first order Fresnel lenses and these extensive keepers houses between them, which from the one tower looking down, you can get a good idea of what these were like. And those of you that have spent time at lighthouses in the United States, there's a great deal of difference between the structures where the keepers lived in these lighthouses versus the ones in the United States, a lot of times which were just built as separate houses, you know, one for the head keeper, maybe one for the assistant keeper. But as we've seen here, even just at the one at Pendine and some of the other ones, you can see an awful lot of very extensive buildings that were used for the keepers. This, after we went to the Lizard, we went to Land's End, which, if you look on a map, is at the very tip of England down here. And as it turns out, the 2 points in the United Kingdom that are the furthest apart that you can actually go on land to are Land's End and this John O'Groats, which is 874 miles. And this is kind of a touristy thing in England because people like to say they've been at both ends or they start at one end and go to the other. They have bike races that go the whole distance. People walk part of it at each end. So it's a pretty important tourist destination for both individuals. At Land's End, which is kind of a touristy type place, you can see where, shows you how far we are from New York, and 28 miles out to the Isles of Scilly, where we're going next, and the Longships Lighthouse, 1.5 miles offshore. You can see we were there on the 16th of September. This year, if you wanted to have your picture taken in front of the name of your town and how far it was from Land's End, for $5 you could do that. Well, we decided it wasn't worth it. We got a picture of the sign. We figured we could Photoshop anything we wanted to in here. But again, this, you know, kind of gives you an idea of the year and when we were there. So at least that reminds us of that. Now offshore here is the Longships Lighthouse. It was called Longships supposedly because the rock formation looked like a Viking longship. I looked at several pictures of this, and I'm not seeing it, but you know, maybe it looked different before they blew off the top of it and put the lighthouse on. This is the first of the 4 rock lights in Britain that we saw on this particular tour. The storms off this point are considered to be about as bad as they get. And again, if you look at, it's where the English Channel, the Atlantic, the Bristol Channel, the Celtic Sea all come together. And as a result, you get some pretty nasty storms here. Give you an idea of how bad they get. The first tower that was built here in 1795 was 79 feet tall. And the problem was that the waves kept crashing over the top of the tower. So that's a wave crashing over a tower that's 79 feet in the air. They built the second one 115 feet in 1873, and also designed again by James Douglas, who designed the Eddystone. So this was the Longships. This you get a really good view of from Land's End, which is where this particular photo was taken. Jeremy said at the beginning that we did, you know, you do some other things on these tours other than go to lighthouses. I showed you how we went by, you know, the Roman baths and the Bath Abbey and the Crescent, you know, townhouses. Here, real quickly, are some other things. Of course, you got to go to a castle. This is Dunster Castle, which is in the town of Dunster, which was actually built shortly after the Battle of Hastings. This was a really interesting castle. I didn't make it up to this. This is the top of a hill. A lot of work to get up there. One of the other participants and I spent some time down here in the town in a pub. Another one of the famous structures here is St. Michael's Mount, which is sort of the sister or brother, if you will, of Mont Saint-Michel, which is in France. This is the Cornish counterpart of that. This was also a Benedictine monastery. We did hike, this sits on an island. We did hike up to this. We saw a lot of these. We did not go into a Cornish tin mine, but you see a lot of remnants of the Cornish tin mines, which are all over Cornwall. And then the Lightford Gorge, which is the deepest gorge in southwest England. We went along about 1.5 miles of trails and whirlpools and waterfalls. And as you can see here, hanging on kind of for our dear lives, coming down some slippery steps down to one of the whirlpools that was in this particular area. And we did other things too, but it just gives you an idea that on the days off that we weren't at lighthouses, we were doing other cultural types of things. Oh, one other one, which we actually did after we went to the Eddystone, was go to the Exeter Cathedral, which was built in 1050 through 1400. This was massive. Never seen anything quite like this. And this was big, then we went inside, and this vaulted ceiling is just phenomenal. Supposedly, it holds around 1,200 people, and we were able to at least get a peek inside at this particular structure. Oh, this is what Jeremy was talking about. This is one of the things we found interesting. It's kind of ahead of its time in the United States. The hand wash. It's an all-in-one hand washing and dryer. You push this button right here, and the soap comes out. Then you push this button here, and the water comes out to wash your hands. And then you push this button here, and the blow dryer comes on. So actually, instead of having 3 different things to do here, you just kept pushing buttons and were able to wash your hands. This is one of the signs we saw in Lundy. I really love this. Read what it says. Next sailing. Saturdays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and some other days. Now, this is something that we learned about the boatmen in this particular area. The regular sailing by ferries is one thing, but these gentlemen that have these small boats that took us out to these lighthouses, they sort of operate on their own time and when they're ready. When we were on St. Mary's, Jake told me that these guys got together in the morning, and they had these certain charters during the day that you just sort of parceled out to the boatmen. I guess they rolled dice to see who took who, and that's how you found out. And so we would be standing down there waiting for a boat, but never knowing which boat we would get, hoping it would be this one, and then it turned out to be, of course, some small thing with no cover. This is the solution that we have now. We think that the post office in the United States should do is take on something else. They could sell hot pasties in the post office, which then again would get them more income, and even beach toys. I love it. And so it just struck us as funny. They're always talking in the United States about how the post office is losing money. Well, here's the solution. To show you how our bus driver did, this bus right here for coach, and this is our coach right here. This is how much room we have to make it through here. Now, we were actually able to, by this coach coming over here, pretty much taking out these flower pots, and our coach going over here and literally inching down here. And this particular, but the towns and or the roads in these small towns, this is the way they are. And you bring a coach this size in there, we had a lot of this, but these drivers were amazing and able to make these kinds of moves. All right, then we went out to the Isles of Scilly. On the way out, we passed Tatterdoo, which is the lighthouse that when the rest of us went to the Lizard, small group of them went down here. I heard they climbed over some fences and got on private property to get in there. They were actually able to see it from the land. We passed it on the way out on this ferry that took us out to the Isles, and we passed long ships, although it was quite a distance in here. But we went fairly close to Wolf Rock, which, along with long ships, was the warnings on this end of this peninsula out to Hewtown on the St. Mary's Island. This is us climbing, getting onto this ferry. You can see actually this is the Penzance Lighthouse here, and we were all kind of worried here because they gave us all these rules about first of all, you can only take one bag with you for a couple. You had to put all these appropriate tags on it, and then they kind of loaded it into this big box and then threw it in here and loaded it on the ship. This is Mary Lee standing here, who was always very concerned about our luggage getting there, making sure that this little container got on board. And when they got to the other end, making sure that And it was funny because when we got back, when they dropped this thing when we got back, it came out like in a big net. And so here's like 200 pieces of luggage, and everybody, it reminded me of something you would do in grade school where you took off all your shoes and everybody ran around trying to find their shoes, is the way we found our luggage on this trip. This is the last lighthouse built in England, built in 1965 as a result of a wreck that claimed 11 lives off this shoreland right here. Totally prefab iron lighthouse, totally automated from the beginning. I'm assuming, and that I saw Ron Bandock and a few others that were on this walk here. There's a fence up here. I don't know if this is the one they had to climb over in order to actually get down to it. But here's a closer look, again, totally automated from the beginning. This is Wolf Rock, which we went by again on the way. And one of the things, I don't know whether it was disappointing or what, but we started to see that these lighthouses all kind of looked alike, because this Wolf Rock kind of looked just like the one at Longships, and probably because of design by the same people. This one was actually named for a chimney of rocks that was at the base of it, that when it filled and emptied with water, made a howling sound, kind of like a wolf. And before there was a lighthouse there, this actually acted as some kind of a warning sign, almost like a fog signal for the vessels that this rock was nearby. Now, there are we'll call them enterprising people on land who used to go out here and fill this chimney up with rocks so it wouldn't make that noise. And then after the ships wrecked on this particular rock, they would go out and salvage what they could. So this is the way that they, made their lives, at that particular time. It was very notorious for shipwrecks until they built this particular lighthouse. This one was actually designed by a gentleman by the name of James Walker, who actually just copied Smeaton's Smeaton's architecture from his light at the Eddystone. This is also made a little bit of history because it was the first one that had the helipad added to the top. And this is what these look like from the air. This is obviously a picture I got from the internet. Give you some idea of what the top of these look like after they added this structure, the iron structure around it to hold the helicopter when it landed. I'm not sure how this works. I can't tell whether this is a way to get down inside, but they had to have some way to get up and down from that helicopter. This is the harbor at Hughtown on the island of St. Mary's in the Scilly Isles. Very popular tourist destination, lots of boats floating around. This was the ferry that brought us out there. Again, the cranes are just used to load and unload the containers because it doubles as a cargo ship going back and forth between here and the mainland. While we were there, we also ran into this vessel, what's called the Patricia, which is Trinity houses, and it's called a multifunctional tender. And this is the ship that operates around the coast of England and Wales and the Channel Islands, that maintains the aids to navigations and provides other services along the way, perhaps towing vessels and whatever. We got a good photo of it here. We ran into her again in Portland Bill, and we weren't too happy to see her there because they were there on an inspection tour, which means they closed the tower for climbing taking away our last chance to climb a lighthouse on this tour. We were kind of annoyed about that, but can't tell Patricia where to go, I guess. These are the Isles of Scilly. There were actually 4 or 5 large ones. The main ones are the one at St. Mary's, this one here at Tresco and St. Martin's. There were 2 lighthouses, one on each end, if you will, that obviously pointed out, if you will, showed mariners where, when you were getting close to those islands. There was a day beacon over here. This wasn't an actual lighthouse, but rather a day beacon. If you follow me here, we started out here and went in this direction up through these little passage here to Round Island, back around St. Martin's, and then back here to Tresco, where we had to get off, hike up to here where we had lunch, and then take a different boat down here. Okay. Well, first of all, this little lighthouse here at Caninis Head was actually built to replace the one on St. Agnes. Just a small structure, iron structure. Notice the date 1911, so it's not that old, but it did provide guidance around this particular point. When we went through up in here, we saw a lot of seals. There was a lot of seals around these particular islands, most common wildlife we saw on all these islands. And then the Round Island light up here at the northern most point on these islands, attached to this 1-story keeper's house. This one had, look at the size of the lantern room on this one. The 15-foot high lantern room had an 8-ton light in it, and it was one of those hyper radial lights, which are one of the biggest lights that they ever made for these particular towers. The wind on this point, turns out, was about as strong as it gets anywhere, and it destroyed, in 1954, a particular storm there. The wind gauge was destroyed, and when it was destroyed, it was at 110 miles an hour. So almost hurricane-style winds at this particular light. Over here at this day beacon, this is the oldest day mark in Britain, called the St. Martin's Day Mark, built in 1683, and again, acting only as a day mark, but 36 feet in height and can see easily during the day the red and white stripes. Now, here's the story of what happened here. When we landed here, we were supposed to get our boat ride over to here and have lunch at the New Inn, which was pretty cool. But because of the tides, we couldn't land over here, so they dropped us off here. So here we are getting off our boat. And as you can tell, the weather isn't exactly all that good. Everybody's got their rain gear on and everything. And then Jake, our guide, tells us this. It's just a short walk, less than a mile from here to here. Well, first of all, we didn't even know if there was only one road. And as it turned out, when you got to this point, some people took off in this direction, thinking that was the right road, and ended up having to do this. But as it turned out, this was what we ended up calling the creation of what we called the Jake Mile, because 1 Jake Mile actually equals 1.75 miles. So after this, every time when Jake said it was like a mile, we would convert it into Jake miles, much like you convert, kilometers into miles. And just as a side note, those of you that were with us in Brittany, we had an English guide there whose famous line was "just around the corner." And of course, just around the corner to us meant just around the corner. But to David, it meant around the corner and about 3/4 of a mile beyond that. So, these English guys and their ideas They're just mad because we don't use, millimeters and kilometers and things like that. So this was the birth of the Jake Mile. The next day, we were able to take another boat ride out, this time to the two lighthouses at these islands out here, the Rock Lighthouse at Bishop Rock and the original light that lit this end of the Isles at St. Agnes. This was our boat that day. To give you again an idea, as you can see back here, this is mostly exposed. And the reason I'm telling you all this is when we get to go to the Eddystone, it doesn't get any better than this. So get a better idea of how you're sitting outside here. This is the St. Agnes light that was the first one built down on this island down here to mark this end of the island. Right now, it's again a vacation rental, no lantern in it, not operational. But Bishop Rock is. Now you can begin to see, if you haven't ever looked at the rock lighthouses, this one looks an awful lot like Wolf Rock, which looked an awful lot like the one at Longships, and as soon you'll see, looks an awful lot like the Eddystone. But Wolf Rock Bishop Rock has a couple of interesting factoids about it. The Guinness Book of Records lists it as the world's smallest island with a building on it. So this is probably this is more at high tide, but this is a very small island, this building, so it made it into the Guinness World Book of Records. It's, again, these rocks around the Scilly Isles, much like the ones around Land's End, are extremely dangerous. And one of the most famous shipwrecks here happened when a British fleet was returning from a naval battle in the Mediterranean, and they literally missed the turn to go into the English Channel and just kept going. And not realizing where they were, ended up crashing into these rocks, and 2,000 men in that British naval fleet were lost in this particular area. One of the worst disasters ever in British naval history. And this being because there was no way to warn them of these particular rocks. They call it Bishop's Rock, supposedly again here because it looked like a bishop's hat or a bishop's mitre. Not sure I'm seeing that either. The sometimes referred to the king of the lighthouses because along with the Eddystone are the two tallest lighthouses in England. Now, the waves on this one have been known to hit the lantern room, and in fact, at one time there was a fog bell up here that the waves tore off the lantern room up here and dumped it in the ocean, and this is 144 feet high. So you can imagine what it must have been like being a keeper in this particular lighthouse with waves that high. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. There's one more thing here. I think I have a photo of this. Oh, this is to prove we were there. It kind of shows you how close we were actually able to get to that lighthouse. But one of the interesting things about this one is this one had a hyper radial lens that was biform, meaning again there were two of them, one on top of the other. Now we saw the little one at Blacknor earlier on the tour, but this one was huge, and they've taken the one that's shown here has been taken out and in a museum, whereas the bottom one is still in the tower. But can you imagine, each of these had 10 bullseye lenses, and the whole thing weighing 8 tons. One of the biggest optics ever put in a lighthouse. Okay, finally back on land. Now, just take a second to read this, give you some idea of what the story about the Eddystone is. So this is a reef of rocks that are at low tide, you know, even at low tide are not that high out of the water, and at high tide are totally hidden. And as it indicates here, we set aside 3 days, hoping that one day would allow us to make the trip to the lighthouse. To appreciate what happened at the Eddystone, we can very quickly go through the history of the lighthouses there. And because no one was willing to build a lighthouse here, Trinity House never, tried to build one out there. But the first lighthouse built out there by Henry Winstanley, he actually lost some ships on the reef out there and made a deal with Trinity House to build a lighthouse there in return for being able to collect dues from shipping companies that actually passed that particular lighthouse. Well, the first one he built was made out of wood, and it only survived a short time, and actually less than a year later, it was gone. And he built the second one, which is depicted right here, which was taller and made primarily of stone. And it actually stood until 1703, when supposedly one of the biggest storms ever to hit the south of England totally destroyed the structure and everybody in it, including Winstanley, who had decided to go out there during the storm to basically prove how strong the lighthouse was. Well, he died in the process of trying to prove that. This tower was 69 feet tall. Now I take it back, 59 feet tall. The next one, Rudyard's Tower, was 69 feet tall, and actually shows here as the second lighthouse, but if you count Winstanley's first lighthouse, it's the third one here. His was shaped more like a cone, whereas you can see Winstanley's was octagonal, and this one was also this one was built of layers of granite and timbers, and was actually much stronger and stood for 47 years. This one was destroyed by fire. The entire thing ended up burning down. There's a story here about a 95-year-old lighthouse keeper who, when trying to extinguish the fire, was throwing buckets of water upward toward in the tower when some of the metal roof melted, and while he was looking up, he swallowed a hunk of the metal coming off the roof. They said he ended up living for 12 days. They actually got him back to shore. And when he died, they did an autopsy and found that piece of lead in his stomach, a full 7-ounce piece of lead. And that's actually on display at the Edinburgh Museum. Now, there's a 94-year-old lightkeeper trying to save the light tower, ends up swallowing a hunk of lead. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it shows up in a lot of the history associated with this particular light. Now, after this one was gone, John Smeaton was hired to construct a tower there. And one of the things that he did, he used the idea of an oak tree, which you notice where the base kind of spreads out toward the bottom to give it a stronger base. He also dovetailed the stones together and created some kind of a quick setting cement that made it easier to build that particular tower. the other thing I'd like to point out here, if you look on this diagram, you can see the low water line here being below these rocks, which gives you an idea of what's stuck out. And then up here, the high water line and where that was compared to where they built these. Most of these lighthouses, with the exception of the last one, were pretty much right on the high, the high mean water line. When we finally got to the Douglas Tower, they decided the main thing was they built a bigger base at the bottom and then built the tower on that. This is the one that still stands today. And the other thing about this one made it even stronger. In addition to dovetailing the granite blocks as they went together in a horizontally, they also were dovetailed vertically, which made them virtually impossible to move. These over this particular tower didn't fall down, wasn't destroyed. They actually had to dismantle it because the rock below is what cracked, not the tower, and it made it unstable because of what it was sitting on. And here's a couple of archive photos that show you this. On the one on the left shows you Smeaton's Tower over here while it was still in use while they were building the Douglas Tower here. And then on the right, after the completion of the Douglas Tower, they disassembled, if you will, Smeaton's Tower over here and actually moved the whole thing to Plymouth. Now, I tried to find some pictures of the Eddystone before they put that helipad up there. There aren't a whole lot of them. All the pictures you see today have that helipad on the top. And there aren't many pictures, if you will, of Smeaton's Tower except as it exists today on shore. If you go on shore, this is something that we found. We called it Smeaton's footprint, because this is a footprint of the way the blocks were intertwined or interlocked on the base of his tower. Whereas you see, as waves would hit the side, it would just make this thing stronger and stronger. And when Douglas built his, they actually would have dovetailed it going vertically also, which made it even stronger. At the top of the tower here, this was pretty interesting. This was the lighting apparatus that was actually in Smeaton's Tower when it was on the Eddystone. So you can see was this candelabra. You would have all these candles that would provide the light, a two-tiered candelabra, which they brought in and put in the rebuilt tower. And this is what Smeaton's Tower looks like today as it is on shore. So they took this thing apart brick by brick, brought it on shore, and rebuilt it just pretty much in honor of John Smeaton, who, along with Douglas and the Stevensons, were really the architects of these superior lighthouses. And there's a better picture of that as it looks today. All right, but now getting to the Eddystone. This was the first boat going. We called this boat 1. You can see people are getting pretty well dressed up here. This guy here, he didn't go, you can tell. This guy, I believe, was the captain. But as you can see, there's virtually no cover here. This is all out in the open as we were getting ready to go. Now, what happened here is this was the first of the 3 days that we said, okay, if we can go today, we should go today, because you never know what it's going to be like the next 2 days. And the weather forecast was, okay, it's going to be cloudy, but there was not supposed to be any rain, and it looked fairly calm here. But if you remember what the level description of the Eddystone rock said, no matter how calm it's here, it's always rough out there. But we were afraid that if we didn't take our chances here, we wouldn't make it. This is boat 2. Now, in this particular case, there was a little bit of room inside, but the rest of it totally exposed. Sorry. One of the things you can see here are these rails. This is used sometimes as a dive boat, and when the guys in there that were going out to go scuba diving, they would just hang on to ropes hanging on to this rather than sitting down. Okay, this again, we're back to Jake. Jake got on this boat with us, had no intention of going, and he said he was going to go back to the hotel and help Jerry unload the bus, get all the luggage to our room. And the boat captain had this dog that Jake kind of adopted, and he was sitting there, and we said, Jake, you cannot not go to this lighthouse. Very few people ever get out to this. You can put this on your resume. And we finally talked him into going. He had to go back to the coach, get rid of this is the way he was dressed all the time, and put on some rain gear to go with us. And here we are. This, you can see, it's pretty calm out here. We're getting ready to go. Now it's time to leave. This is the inner harbor at Plymouth, and this being a pier light on the way out, being worked on. Now the next photograph was actually taken when we came back in, but it kind of gives you an idea of what happened to the weather. You got a tug out here escorting a submarine. There's that same lighthouse, so you can start to get an idea of what the weather turned like after we left. Okay, here's me hanging on for my life as we get going out. You can see the clouds, a little bit rougher seas behind us. Now, here's my wife hanging on for dear life. There's Bill Wainscott hanging onto a rope. Steve Valder just wishing he wasn't here. Okay, here we finally, and we made sure we took a picture of us at the Eddystone. Here's boat 1. Or actually, this is our boat. Oh, no, this is our boat. This is boat 2, because you can actually see there was some space inside here. The weather's a little rougher. It was raining at this particular point. And I'll be honest with you, when we finally saw it, I said, didn't we just see this one? Because it looks just like Wolf Rock, and it looks like Bishop Rock. But I guess, because of where you are and its history, now you can at least say you've been to the Eddystone. Now here's the other boat with less cover on it. And again, the skies are a little nasty right here. Here you can see what's left of Smeaton's Tower. And like I said, they were not able to take the whole thing off. And so you can see we're probably at a fairly high tide here, because remember, this actually sits on a base that was right at the point of about high tide. Now it's raining, it's cold, it's blowing. One of the most classic things I ever heard in my life is this. Jake Simkin hanging on for his life. He says, "You lighthouse people are quite mad." And this was his reaction. And he wasn't real happy that we talked him into going out here. And as you can see, he had his good shoes on, but he had his rain gear on. But he said, this is a quote I will never forget. And those of you that travel with the Lighthouse Society, you already knew this. Here's another picture of the two, the stump and the light itself, and one where it kind of gives you a better idea. They really weren't that far apart because there wasn't that many rocks out here to build it on. And to get a look at what this looks like from the top right now, you can still see the stairs that climbed up into this particular lighthouse. We did make it back. We were cold. we went back to our rooms. We all took hot showers, drank hot toddies. Several people did catch cold from it, but all I can say is when we all got done, the next day at least we can say we were there. Excuse me a second, I gotta get rid of this cough. These are what are referred to as the Plymouth Steps in Plymouth, where the Mayflower Steps, where the Mayflower supposedly left England for the United States. And here you see all kinds of remembrances about that journey with a list of those who were aboard the Mayflower, including, John Alden, who's probably the most famous. There's also an inscription on the stone here of 1620. Those of you that have been on our Massachusetts tour saw this in Massachusetts at the other end. This is Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts. So now we've been to both ends of that particular journey. Our last lighthouse was not on the original schedule. We actually said goodbye to our guide. He had another engagement, so our bus driver Jerry took us the rest of the way. And we wanted to go to this Portland Bill, which is a lighthouse on this little island almost, sticking out into the English Channel. Initially, or originally, there was two lighthouses here, a high and a low. This was the high lighthouse that guided ships passed here, built in 1869. Low lighthouse, the same. That's not a lantern room, that's actually a bird observatory that was added to this low light before they built the new Portland Bill light. But the Portland Bill light now looks like this. Kind of reminds you of Smeaton's lighthouse with the red stripe on it. And once again, this is where we ran into the officials from Trinity House who did not allow us to, it wasn't that they didn't allow us, but they were doing an inspection here, which kept us from actually being able to go inside. Well, that's pretty much it. There was a day mark there, which was supposedly one of the older day marks in England. But just for those of you that were on a tour, let me take you down a short memory lane of who was there. We spent a lot of time eating. There's Jake again. This is the group of guys who did a lot of standing around while the women were shopping. A lot of ice cream eating. That's me and Mary Lee.
They were shopping too.
This is Darlene taking a picture of something. This was that boat ride back from Tresco. We were pretty cold, and that was after our Jake Mile. We were pretty cold and felt like we were on a boat of refugees coming back from somewhere. Phil and Mary, our friends from New York. Hendrik, who's from the Netherlands, joined us for the trip to the Scillies. Phil and Peggy. This was just one of the best groups that we ever had a chance to travel with. And the end of that ditty about the lighthouse keeper, let's see if I can do this. Then the phosphorus flashed in her seaweed hair. I looked again, but my mother wasn't there. A voice came echoing out of the night. The devil take the keeper of the Eddystone light. And that's the way it ends up. One more thing. Everybody needs to wish Jeff a happy birthday. Yesterday was his birthday, but he always spends 3 days celebrating his birthday. Day before, day of, day after. So today is Jeff's birthday, so everybody can throw in a happy birthday to Jeff.
I give permission for everybody to unmute themselves for this. Happy birthday, Jeff. Okay,
Happy
okay,
birthday, Jeff.
you can mute yourselves again now.
Thank
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh,
So,
I'll ask
sorry
questions.
about that coughing.
yeah, if
Muted
people
myself.
could mute yourself, and we'll start the questions and answers now. That was fantastic, Skip, as I knew it would be, as it always is when you do these. Remind me, Skip, how long that tour was? How many days? Skip, how many days was the tour?
16.
16 days, wow. I always love hearing about the rock lighthouses, the wave-swept lighthouses. I think those are the most interesting, and I'm glad you went into how important the engineering of Smeaton's Tower was. But my favorite thing, of course, was you lighthouse people are quite mad. That should be like the subtitle for this tour, you know, or the tagline, as they say. So we're gonna take questions now. I don't see any questions in the chat, but that's one way you can ask questions. But another way is if you digitally raise your hand, we will call on you. To do that, you click on participants, and over on the right, under participants, you should see the icon for raising your hand.
Let me just ask my friend Keith. How'd I do, Keith?
You have to unmute yourself,
Gotta
Keith.
unmute.
Whoop.
Can you unmute him?
There's no, I can only ask
Yeah,
him to.
right.
There he goes.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, that was very good. That was excellent. I really look forward to seeing this tour, and that's very good. Yes, and I've been out to the Eddystone in similar conditions. Yeah, I had my full sailing kit on, which I never go sailing anyway. But I had a sailing kit on when I went out there, and it was just as rough and wet in that time. Yeah, so that was very good. Excellent tour. Brilliant information.
I think it's rough like that all the time. That the thing that was kind of disheartening is the next day turned out to be a beautiful day. And we all were thinking, oh my God, what if we'd gone out on that day? But once you get out from Plymouth beyond those breakwaters, it could have been just as bad. So
that's right.
It was a crapshoot, but yeah.
So Jeremy, there's a couple of questions. One is, what are the interiors like of these rock lights, since there's no keeper's house? Skip?
Well, you didn't get into any of them.
We didn't get into any, but of the diagrams that I've seen of them.
You got into Smeaton's Tower, didn't you? On Plymouth Hoe.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, everything is just obviously stacked on top of each other. You know, first there's like storage. There'll be, like sleeping arrangements, a couple of stories of those, kitchens, leisure room, living room kind of thing. So it's fairly, it's only similar in that it has the same rooms, but they're just simply stacked on top of each other. And all of them that I've seen diagrams of the inside, that's what they're like inside.
Right.
And I've noticed that the interior of those lighthouses, the space is sparse. It's not a lot of space. The doorways are all very small, and the interior spaces are very compact. So they didn't waste a lot of room with high ceilings and open floor plans.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. I was just doing something on the Cordouan Lighthouse in France, which was one of the oldest lighthouses in the world, and it's like a palace. But these rock lighthouses in Britain were not like palaces. I think it was pretty Spartan living conditions inside them. As you said, Jeff, not a lot of space.
Yeah. We have another question. How long did it take to get out to the Eddystone from Plymouth?
Forever.
About an hour, I think, each way.
Uh-oh.
Somebody's sharing her, I think Nancy Dillon is sharing her screen. Please click stop sharing because we're all seeing your desktop at this point. Nancy Dillon, please click stop sharing.
Oh, she didn't leave.
Mm,
No, there you go.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, it seemed like it took forever. But I would imagine, Keith, what, about an hour?
Yeah, if I recall when I did it, it was an hour each way.
Yeah,
But
well,
it's 14 miles.
A long hour.
yeah, it was,
Yeah, a long hour, yeah.
yeah.
It's like the miles
It's
are
like
actually
a Jake hour, yeah. It's like a
exactly.
Jake mile, But and of course, once we got out there, after going through all that, we had those two boat guys, take us around and get as many photos as they wanted. But at some point, everybody said, "Let's go home now."
Yeah, I recall it was about a 3-hour trip when I went out.
Mm,
A 3-hour trip.
We have,
three-hour
Like
tour.
Gilligan's Island,
I think we have a raised hand from Linda and David and Ben.
Yes,
Okay.
Linda and David.
Is there
if
a
you-
hazardous pay for the rock lighthouses when they were manned? I mean, did they get more money for being out there? It seems like those are
That's a
harsh.
good question. I believe they did. Certainly in this country, the keepers at places like that got higher pay. I believe that was the case in in Britain also.
I would certainly imagine.
And
Yeah,
also,
I like being on a light ship.
during the days that they were building these lighthouses, it was so dangerous. They really had to recruit people. And one of the ways they recruited people to build them was they gave them special tokens so that if you were actually on a lighthouse construction crew, you had a way to get out of being sent off to some war somewhere that the English government was participating in. So, it was that dangerous where people would choose, do I go to war or do I build a lighthouse?
Yeah.
Percentage-wise, your chances are probably better in the war. But
Maybe.
I didn't know that. That's interesting, Jeff. So we have a few people who've unmuted their microphones. I'm not sure if that's because they have questions or not. Art Sullivan has his microphone unmuted. Art, did you have a question wherever you are? No, I guess not. Esther Carr, well, Esther unmuted earlier to make some comments, right? Am I right about that?
I think Ben has a question, Jeremy.
Where
Here he goes.
oh, I
He's
see.
unmuted.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ben.
Skip, very good. I really enjoyed that. What can you say about, can you elaborate on the power for the light generator fuel? Can you elaborate on that?
The power, the range of the light.
The power to light the light.
He means the type of power. For which particular light are you talking about?
Well, pretty much all of them had.
Mainly
now.
the stag lights, the rock lights, mainly.
Yeah,
Well, they're solar powered, right? Eddystone is solar powered, right?
Yeah,
It's got
most today they're all automated. And
I could say, yeah, if I may comment, in the early days, of course, they were all oil lights, and then when they progressed to electric lights, they had generators in the building. So down in the base of the oil tank, and that would supply generators, which would run the power up at the top. It's only in latter years have they gone to solar power, and that's when they've had to take the big lenses out because they need to be much more reliable, and so that's the way they go now. Because
And
if
before
you look at the
the
lighthouse,
introduction of the Fresnel lens, they actually used candelabras in these lighthouses. And Skip actually had mentioned that when you're at the top of Smeaton's Tower on Plymouth Hill, you can see the old framework for the candles. And if you go to Trinity House in London, where there's the original building is a museum now, basically, and offices, but they actually have on display one of the original candles from Smeaton's Tower, which is fascinating. And in addition, they also have the lead that they removed from the gullet of the old lighthouse keeper that they pass around. You can hold that piece of lead that killed this poor gentleman.
Oh, I thought that was in the Museum of Scotland at Edinburgh. Maybe it was on loan.
The Trinity House in England, in London.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
sad that I
okay.
missed it when I was in the Museum of Scotland, but I guess maybe it wasn't there anyway.
No, it wasn't.
Jeff read a different thing.
So let's
Can't
see.
believe anything you see on the internet. Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
somebody wanted to know what it costs to rent the boats and how's it possible to budget for these kind of trips when there are so many variables.
You know, the planning these tours, it's a wild card. It's not an exact science. And if you have a AAA personality, you like everything just so, don't even try, because every single day something changes. So, but they're fun. And these type of boat rides, I don't know. I mean, I can't remember how much was one of those charters. Skip it probably was like $3,000-4,000 for one of those boats to get you to the Eddystone and back. So, and that was back in 2012. So, you know, as things go up in price, everything gets more expensive. But
I mean, but we built everything around that. It's like we started with the Eddystone and then worked out everything else. You know, worked it back from there. The only thing we couldn't predict, of course, was the weather.
Yeah, that's why you gave it 3 days, because they wanted to make sure that, you know, if you were rained out one or another day, you'd have plenty of opportunities to see the lighthouse. So not all tours we have the luxury to do that, but on this one we did.
Yeah, we could have used another day on it to get out to Lundy, because that one would have been really nice, and the next day was nice, but we couldn't go back.
Mm-hmm.
Two things. Carmelia in the chat just posted a link to a video of a tour of the interior of the Bishop Lighthouse on YouTube. So there's a link there if people want to click on that and see.
That's
see
great.
that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Excuse me. And also Hillary Siri just asked, will you repeat the trip? Any plans for that?
Not to the Eddystone.
Once in a lifetime is enough for that.
That's up to, ask Jeff.
Well, you know, the frequency of when we operate tours is directly related to how many people travel with the society. So if everybody can get more people to join, then we can offer more tours and repeat more tours more often. So it's really connected to the society's membership, because a very small percentage of the society's membership actually travels. Most people, live vicariously through our exciting experiences. So we got to get more people signing up for the society and traveling with us, so that we can offer regular tours like this on more often. I would love to get another tour out to the Eddystone. That would be great.
All right. I don't see any other questions in the chat, or if anybody has any questions you want to verbally ask, we're going to give you one more chance to digitally raise your hand and we'll call on you, or if you want to ask something in the chat. So we will wrap things up momentarily. I want to mention that in about an hour, I'm going to be signing on for another event, another Zoom event, in case anybody here is interested. I think there are people here who are doing the other event too, but I'm here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and the other event is for Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. We take care of 2 local lighthouses here, and it starts at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and we're calling it a Fall Fling event. We actually have some live music and a number of guests, including Sally Snowman, the only official lighthouse keeper in the U.S., and including Augustin Fresnel is going to make an appearance himself.
From the grave.
Yes, exactly. So you won't want to miss that. And if you want to sign on to that event, go to the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses website, which is Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, singular, portsmouthharborlighthouse.org, or find the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses Facebook page and the link for the Zoom event is on both of those places. I could actually post it here if you want to
Yeah,
take
go
over
ahead
for a
and
minute
post
while
the link in the chat so that people can sign
I'll
up.
do that. I'll do that right
We
now.
had another question. What is the age range of the people who participate in our tours? And the vast majority of our trips, I would give you the age range of 40 and up. Very rarely do we get people under 40. And I would say that the vast majority of people who are traveling with us are retired for the most part, and probably between 50 and 60, 50 to 70. So that's, we're a baby boomer group, basically. If that makes any sense. I just
Okay.
can't hear anybody now for some reason.
No, it's,
Nobody's speaking.
Nobody's talking.
I just want to say hi to Ron Bandock and Phil and Mary, if you're on here, and Ken and Diane and Nancy and all the rest of you that got cold and sick. And I know Nancy got sick on that trip, so there she is. Just want to say it's good seeing you guys. We need to do it again. Maybe we need to do a retro one without going out there. We go climb Smeaton's Tower again. That is
well, we learned one valuable lesson on the Eddystone boat rides, and that is very carefully select the vessel. You can't just trust what you're being told. You have to actually see a picture, because you order one thing and then they come up with a little fishing trawler and it doesn't quite work out. So we've learned a valuable lesson on that trip. Unfortunately, people like Nancy Dillon, who got a cold, and other people who got sick were our guinea pigs. But every trip you learn something new. And for most people who travel with the society, they're seasoned, and you got to roll with the punches. And I learned that very early on.
My shirt from the Scilly Isles.
There's Nancy.
I'm right here. I bought a shirt in the Scilly Isles. Most of us did a lot of shopping there at the Scilly Isles.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun place to shop. And
that's where I showed that picture of the 6 guys standing there doing nothing while the women were shopping.
And they went back.
Nancy, you survived.
We all went shopping. It was the best trip I ever went on. I loved it.
Oh, great.
Thank you, Nancy. Ron Bandock wants to say something.
When you travel.
Hey, Skip.
Hey, Ron.
I think you forgot to mention that everybody on boat 1 didn't have a dry spot left when they came back from Eddystone.
That's true.
I'm not sure anybody on boat 2 did either, but a couple of them spent a lot of time in what little, room there was up there in that cabin. I know when you guys got off, there were not never mind.
We were
a lot of alcohol consumed that night.
Wow. I thought you were going to say they spent a lot of time in the head on the boat.
No.
There was no head.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Makes it even more fun.
No, that's
Yeah.
true.
So
we've taken plenty of boat rides on society tours where we got really wet. But when you get really wet and cold, it's a different story. I remember one trip that I took with Skip. It was to Connecticut and Rhode Island, and we got soaked. And it's when I learned you can't wear light-colored white pants with dark-colored underwear.
Thanks, Jeff.
Oh no, that was in Narragansett Bay on the Rum Runner.
The Rum Runner, exactly.
Yeah.
yeah,
When
You were laughing at me. I had no idea.
so we
when
have a
you
lot
take an international trip, how do you get there? Do you do a group charter, or do you meet the tour over at your destination?
Looks like that's Ellen speaking.
I'll do. So we, a long way back, we did group air, but it very quickly became more expensive for our members to travel as a group because the airlines would charge a premium for keeping everybody together. So we decided that everybody would travel separately. You could take advantage of your miles, your points, or however else you would want to, pay for the trip. And we all meet at the origin of the tour. And the first thing we always do is a welcome dinner. That's the first thing we always do so everybody can get together and, meet each other. So we, as I said, that was basically a decision that was made because we didn't want to waste members' money with, premium of traveling together on the flight. It didn't make much sense. So that's what we've done ever since.
Yeah, the big advantage of that then is also every time we've gone either early or stayed afterward and, made our own arrangements, of course. That way, if everybody flies on their own, you want to go, everybody, usually goes early. That's how you get, we got to see all that stuff in Bristol, or you stay late and go somewhere else. If you're going to go that far, you might as well, go early and stay late.
What's the status of the trips next year?
Well, we've have a lot of the trips from this year we've postponed to next year, and we're optimistic. Everybody keep your fingers crossed that travel restrictions lift and we could come up with a vaccine and anything else we need to do to make people more comfortable with traveling. But I predict a very, very, very good 2021 if travel restrictions lift. Everybody's itching to get back out there and go see things. So we're excited about 2021, and our schedule is posted on our website for what we're offering. It's a combination of things we missed this year and a few other ones that we were planning already for 2021.
But are the trips from this year all full for next year?
No, some are getting full. People are registering. The one big trip we're offering next year to Ireland is slowly but surely filling up. So, you go online and see what we have to offer. If you want to register, there's no penalty. I mean, if we decide you change your mind or you want to cancel, we just refund it. It's just you try to get your name on the list if you can to secure your spot.
I just want to mention that this event will be, a video of this event will be posted online within a couple of days on the U.S. Lighthouse Society Facebook channel. Just search YouTube for USLHS. And also on the USLHS website, there's a page that has all these tour retrospective programs also. So just want to make sure you know that in case you want to relive the experience. So I actually, right. I actually personally need to go soon because I have to get ready for that other event. So I don't know if Jeff, would you have any, or Skip, if you have any parting words?
No, I'm done for the day.
Okay. Good job, Skip, as always. That was great. Jeff, any last words? That sounds bad.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to our tour retrospective. Thank you, Jeremy, for hosting, and thank you, Skip and Mary Lee, for making the presentation. And thank you, everybody, for wishing me a happy birthday. I appreciate that.